So, hello and welcome to another episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today we have two guests in the same location, which we don't often have. Usually we have separate cameras, but that's still good. We have Viktor and Killian together again. Well, I don't know about again, this is your first time or not being together.
We have met before.
Yes.
Yeah, have you? Okay, I don't know how much you guys know about each other. Sometimes, people work together and never actually meet. Especially
Yeah.
with online, right? People sometimes don't even want to show their face ever.
Yeah, we
Right.
met at FlutterCon last summer or this summer.
No, it's Flutter and Friends now, right? That you guys are
Yeah,
back
Flutter
together.
and Friends was just a few days ago in Stockholm. So that's why I'm also in Stockholm right now still. I'm leaving tomorrow, but yeah, this was a nice opportunity to actually visit the Serverpod office for once and then do this together, yeah.
Cool to have you here in person.
Maybe we should kind of talk about, what each product is and then how you guys came together and then what's the relationship at the moment.
So I'm Viktor, the founder of Serverpod. Serverpod is basically a complete backend for Flutter apps. You can write everything in Dart. So you add your methods on your server, will analyze your server code, and then you can call those methods as if they were local methods in your app, which is pretty cool. And we also built like a full ORM for Postgres. So if you need a database, and we cover pretty much all bases with uploading files, doing authentication, all that stuff. So if you want to build your backend in Dart and just use Dart and Flutter, that's the way to go.
I'm Kilian. I'm the creator of Jaspr, which is a framework to build websites in Dart. So it's very front-end oriented, obviously, and it's kind of the missing piece where Flutter Web kind of loses its purpose or its use cases, where you can build certain web apps with Flutter, but it's not really meant to build any kind of website like landing pages, blogs, like anything that's has to have good SEO or needs to load fast. And Jaspr is kind of there, to let you build websites. So, and that's, I think also we see why we fit together so well, because Serverpod is very backend oriented and Jaspr is very front end oriented. And there was a very nice opportunity to bring them together because they're both in their separate spaces, but also every website needs a backend and every backend needs some kind of front end probably. So yeah.
Right. So when you combine basically Jaspr and Serverpod, you both get access to building web pages in Dart, but you also get access to all the stuff that we have on the back end, like the full ORM if you need to connect your website to a database, caching, also if you sometimes need to connect servers in a cluster, the servers can talk to each other. So all those things are just covered by Serverpod, and then you can build like your whole front end part in web. So maybe you're building an app, but for instance, I built a news app before I did Serverpod, and they also need web pages because if you want to share a story with someone, you will need to send them a link. No one will maybe download a full app if you send that. So it can be very beneficial to both have like your app and the web page. And with Jasper, it's very easy to build your web page. So it was like a perfect fit to basically combine our frameworks.
What we talked about when combining the frameworks we meant, so I think 2 months ago or 1 month even, we released a integration that brings together really both frameworks and makes it easier to integrate both. Like we have some bindings and stuff that on both sides super nicely integrate with the technologies and lets you use both kind of together in a way. One of these things that makes it so cool for using both together is that Jaspr isn't only working on the client, but also does server-side rendering, which when you build websites is a way to pre-render your content already on the server. So you have like a faster load time and also better SEO. And with that integration, you can do that, the server-side rendering of your Jasper site with the Serverpod server kind of, and use then all the cool things that Serverpod brings, like your ORM for database access, and load your data from Serverpod inside your Jasper components while doing server-side rendering. So it's a super, maybe in the beginning confusing, but then super cool mix of both frameworks. And I really enjoyed also building it. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about how did this relationship kind of start? Did somebody reach out to another person, or was there people in the community actually using the two together and it just kind of works and then you saw something there? Or how did this conversation start? Because to me, it seemed out of nowhere. And then again, I'm not doing a lot of Flutter these days, so maybe I just missed it.
I can't remember if I reached out to you or if you reached out to me originally, but I try to stay in touch with a lot of the people in the Flutter Dart community, especially people doing stuff on the server side. Obviously, it's I'm very curious about. So I basically connect with everyone I can on LinkedIn that's doing interesting stuff, and just see if we can do something together, or where there can be points of, can be like things like cross promotions, or it can be different opportunities. I think, the whole community just grows if you try to do stuff together.
Yeah, I also don't remember exactly. I just know from Jaspr's side, there were a couple of people in the community that were asking about how to use Jaspr with different backends. And I've known Serverpod for a while. And as it is a Dart backend, it felt very obvious or good to maybe be able to use it. And so for me, that the demand came really from people asking about it. And then somehow we get in contact. I don't remember, but then we talked about, it would be cool to actually make this kind of an official integration and not just someone made some bindings, but actually kind of, make this a supported thing and working on it together kind of.
So who reached out to who then? Victor, were you trying to say that you reached out to him and this kind of idea came up when you guys are just talking?
I think we were in touch like maybe even like a year before I know about Jaspr.
Yeah, there was like a very early time we were in touch, but that wasn't about anything Jaspr or integration related.
Yeah.
So at least we knew our faces, and then we got in contact. Also, I think that was around the time that you did the Full Stack Flutter conference.
Oh yeah.
Where I also hold a talk about Jaspr. So maybe we talked there for the first time about that also.
Yeah. Right.
Victor, I know that there's a lot of people using Serverpod obviously for the back end, Flutter for the front end. Makes sense.
Yeah.
That was always the idea. Flutter already has this web component. Why would people want to be looking at using something like Jaspr rather than just sticking with Flutter? Because that's obviously what the Flutter team says. Usually you already know Flutter when you're using Serverpod. It's hard to understand like why people would do that. Kilian, I think you mentioned that there's, like an SEO benefit for using Jaspr, and also there's a couple other benefits, I'm sure.
A web page in itself is so much more lightweight than a full Flutter app. So I think that's the main benefit. If you don't need the sort of full app experience, you should probably use something other than Flutter. And it's really nice to be able to use Dart for that too. So That's really where Jaspr comes in, as I see it.
It's really just like a different purpose for what you want to use it. I think one good example is also from the Flutter world, of the Flutter web world. There's often the Rive editor named as like a good example for Flutter web, which is like an online editor for making animations. And they have this editor that is completely built with Flutter web. But then, of course, they also have like a landing page like rive.com where you land when you actually go to that page, and then you have some marketing information, maybe like a contact page or whatever. And then you click a link and actually get to that editor. And the whole marketing page is obviously not Flutter web. And this is kind of where you could now use Jaspr. So like in a full project, you want to do everything, you can actually, and maybe should, use all three parts. You can do your Flutter web app with Dart now, obviously, but also now the website and also now the backend with Serverpod. So it's kind of it brings everything together, and every technology has their own purpose and part here where you want to use it.
That's a really good point. I'm also thinking to myself, after checking out your full stack Flutter video, Jaspr itself is quite more flexible than Flutter. For the Flutter web, you just have the Flutter web experience. But Jaspr, you have 3 different types of modes. Do you mind to kind of dig into those modes and when certain modes would be better than others?
Yeah, sure. Again, it's kind of depending on what you're wanting to build. So there's client mode, which is kind of the same mode that Flutter always operates in, which is just client side executing your code, your app or your website code, and then rendering, like meaning you update your page when you click a button or whatever. Then there's server mode, which is kind of like an evolution of client mode, where you also have the the server-side part of like server-side rendering. You can pre-render your website on the server, ship that to the client, and then on the client, you can pick up with normal client-side rendering. So server mode is like client mode plus also the server-side pre-rendering part. And this is great to do with Serverpod and the integration, by the way. And then you have static mode, which does static site generation, which is you pre-render all your pages already at compile time. So it kind of does the same pre-rendering as you have with server mode, but just the time where that happens is different. With server mode, it happens when the user requests your page. Then at that time, your page is pre-rendered on the server and shipped to the client. With static mode, you already do that when you run Jaspr build, like when you compile your website. Then everything is pre-rendered, and the output is again just purely like static HTML files that you can deploy to anywhere, basically. So these are the three modes, and it depends on kind of what you want to build. Do you want to build a purely client-side single-page application? Do you want to build a rich, dynamically server-rendered page that like has maybe also a lot of information that is real-time or that is user-specific? Or do you have like a static page, maybe a blog with a lot of articles, where you still have kind of the server-side rendering part where you want to pre-render all your articles? But since they don't change much, it's way better to do that in compile time because it again results in a faster page, a faster website. So you need to think about what you want to build, and then from that, kind of the mode reveals itself that you should use.
Okay. I had a quick question about a client-side app and also the static app, right? So does this mean that the client one, you theoretically have some like JavaScript things that you probably write in Dart, and then the static one, there's like no interactivity at all. Is that correct?
You can have interactivity with all three modes. So kind of the baseline, the client-side interactivity is always there. And then you just have either the server-side rendering part or the static generation part as like an add-on to that.
Okay. It's just hard for me in my mind to figure out like when I would choose between the two because now they sound quite similar in my mind.
I've made for exactly that purpose, because especially also I know for Flutter developers, there's like a whole different space. Like we as Flutter developers don't deal with anything server-side rendering part. We just do client-side rendering, and that's good. So for that purpose, I also like in the documentation, you have a table with all three modes and then different aspects or features that each mode support or doesn't support.
Okay. I may actually pull up that chart just and maybe show it and walk through it real quick. But we do have a question in the audience. I heard that Serverpod team is developing their own deployment platform for the Serverpod server. Can you tell us any progress on that?
Yeah, that's sort of our prime focus and has been for the last couple of months. So we're building what we call a Serverpod Cloud, which will allow you to basically just do Serverpod Cloud deploy, and we will take your whole Serverpod with your web server, maybe written with Jaspr, put it up in the cloud, connect it to database, and we set up all like the infrastructure for you. So it'll be very, very easy to deploy your servers with Serverpod Cloud. We are going to very, very soon, maybe probably tomorrow or even later today, open up our waitlist for early beta testers. And in a few months, we will have it ready sort of for like everyone. So we're making very, very good progress there, which is very exciting for us. I think it's really the last missing puzzle piece for Serverpod. And since we do this at scale, we'll be able to offer this at like very competitive price to AWS or Google Cloud. It will be less expensive and much, much easier to set it up with Serverpod. So we're excited about that.
So now with the integration with Jasper, are you planning to also have that as part of it? Because I mean, now you have this kind of front end connection, so you can
So
deploy
that
the whole
will
thing.
sort of it will work out of the box basically, because when you set up a Serverpod project, you have basically two options. You can do a Serverpod Mini, which is just the lightweight version of Serverpod. It's basically Serverpod without the database and without the features that are requiring a database. But then you can add on features to that. And like the full Serverpod experience, it actually starts 3 different servers. So it will start your main app server that you typically talk with an API towards your app. And then it starts a web server, which can run. We have some very basic, not as good as Jasper stuff there that you can use. So you can use that to, for instance, build webhooks and stuff like that. So that's a little bit like Dart Shelf, if you will. And then we have a insight server where you can sort of connect and get information about the server that's running if you need to get access of the logs or stuff like that. And we have an app that you can download called Serverpod Insights that can connect to that insight server and pull that information. It also monitors things like the database, and you can see like response times and stuff like that. So all those three will basically run on Serverpod Cloud out of the box. So Jasper will work with the web server part of it.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's a logical step, but that's quite a big endeavor to get into, to start running your own, like, I guess it's going to be like a push service, right? You push your code and then it builds.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on this since February. Right now, we are 8 people working full time on getting Serverpod Cloud out there. So it is a big effort, but it will simplify things for a lot of developers out there. I think in the extension, we start obviously with deploying Serverpod, but it could be any sort of Dart server, or I think we can adapt that pretty easy. And most apps require a very similar infrastructure. You typically need a database, you need buckets for file storage, you need some sort of pub sub, and you need caching. Those are like the sort of big parts that any server will need, and probably the same for web servers most of the time too. So we'll just give that infrastructure that you can hook into with Serverpod. Makes it super easy, but even if you do use something like Dart Frog, that should work too.
You can use the same API that you build with Serverpod, and both for your Flutter app and your Jaspr website, right? Like it can be the same project. And so, yeah, it depends on what you want to do, but generally they are the same. Like from the Serverpod side, it's the same as you would build your server for your app as you would build your server for your site.
What I wanted to know is, why not just build something that works for like containers, so that way you can host any kind of container?
Yeah, we may be doing that. We're starting by actually compiling the Dart code in like correct formats and everything like that. But who knows what the future will hold? We're trying to scope things to make it like to get it out as fast as we can. So that's the reason why we sort of require Dart from the start. But obviously, it could be potentially containers in the future. So we will build that container for you and set everything up correctly from the start.
So I did see that the package for integrating the two is owned by Killian, right? His account. How come this is not underneath Serverpod? Because, like you said, you have 8 people working at Serverpod, right? This seems like something that should be managed by more people, just in case he's busy. I mean,
I think it doesn't really matter where it lays. We will update the stuff when we update Serverpod and just send a pull request to Killian. So it'll be pretty easy to, like a combined effort to keep it up to date.
Yeah, in the end, it doesn't matter where it's published, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, you said you have 8 people working under Serverpod. Is Killian one of those 8 people, or this is like, what kind of partnership do you have at the moment? Is it just, hey, we got good packages, let's just, support the community, or is there something like there's a long-term vision between the two?
Right now, it's just a collaboration between us. So yeah, all the other people are just Serverpod people, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not working for Serverpod, but yeah, we're just collaborating, trying to build the best thing we can. And also, I guess, I mean, there's obviously the plan to support this long term, but the rest, I don't know, we have to see.
I mean, to me, it seemed like a pretty big announcement, but what was the response you got from the community? And, how many people are actually looking at using this? Do you guys have any idea?
The response was pretty great, at least from Jasper's side. I think there were already a lot of people that kind of thought about this, but then didn't do it because there wasn't really an integration yet. And they were super happy that this was done by us, and also kind of surprised, but like positively. In terms of how many using it, I don't have any metrics to that. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure either. We have over 1,000 apps being built with Serverpod, so that's sort of the metric we do know. How many of them use Jaspr? It's a little bit hard to say, but I'm sure it's a bunch. Probably as both frameworks get more popular, grow in the
Yeah.
future, I'm sure.
This package, is it a lot of work? Because it seemed like you already kind of mentioned it. Basically, Jasper's focusing more on the front end, Serverpod more on
Yeah.
the back end. What does this package actually provide? I mean, do I even need it to work with the two? It seems like I should be able to somehow integrate them, because I see Jasper more like a kind of like a React kind of framework, where React strictly is on the front end. It does very simple job, but Jasper obviously does a lot more than what React does. But what the nice part about React is that you can basically combine it with whatever state management thing you kind of want to a certain extent. So was it very difficult to put them together? And what does this package do? Do I even need the package?
I would say so. One is like during the initial development, we had to fix some things on both sides to make it work. So that was kind of, I guess, maybe even most part of the initial development. And then the package itself right now are mainly kind of lightweight bindings between the two that just make it more convenient to use. So for example, like doing the server side rendering as part of the Serverpod web server is just kind of binding like classes and models between those two to make it super easy to just kind of plug and play. For that feature, all it does, and you could do it yourself, but then you'd have to rewrite just the bindings that the package already provides.
We did a few adjustments to make sure everything ran with Jasper, but I don't think it was that much code required. So as you say, someone could probably plug this together themselves, but it's just much easier when someone has done it for you and there's a guide for how to do it step by step.
Now, getting started, like let's say I want to do a brand new Serverpod Jaspr project. Could I just use this one? And is there a generator that can generate the file structure for me? Or is it that I really need to have two different repos? Or can I have a mono repo? Is there like a single command that will run both at the same time? What's kind of the development experience at the moment?
So you typically build Serverpod with like any Serverpod within a monorepo. So that fits right into Jasper as well. There are a few steps in sort of the integration right now. We're looking at maybe building some template in the future to just be able to create a new sort of Serverpod Jaspr project with just one line of code in your terminal. But I mean, the setup is still pretty easy. So it's just follow the guide. There's maybe, I don't know, 5 steps or something.
Yeah. And then kind of you have your Serverpod project as like the base, and then Jasper is part of that Serverpod project. Yeah, that's kind of how you set it up. As you told, there isn't a CLI command to do that yet, but it's not that many steps. And then you run both Serverpod and Jasper. And since Jasper already had in the CLI the option to like run an additional command when you run the dev server for Jasper, we made it right now that kind of when you run Jasper serve, this also then runs Serverpod. So you just have to type one command. But this may change in the future depending on how also we want to integrate the CLIs for both. I think we have some more things planned, but yeah, right now but it's not too complicated right now either way.
Yeah, it's an easy setup.
I'm excited because I've been working out with Tailwind, and I see that Jasper already has an integration with Tailwind, which is super exciting. And I see that you pull in the binary, so this probably means that you can also use the JIT mode where you can create random classes.
Yeah, so you have to install Tailwind for that yourself, but the integration is mainly to also run Tailwind then with the correct arguments.
I mean, it is a bit tricky because when I'm saying I'm talking about like developing with Jasper, because with Flutter Web, I mean, the benefit of that one is that you stay in Flutterland, you stay with what you know. It's pretty simple. I mean, as long as you know the Flutter widgets, you can build a, quote unquote web app, right? But with HTML, which is what you're rendering, or at least what it seems like, that's a lot more tricky because you have to kind of know the tags, what they're for. I mean, I guess you have probably some, I would call, training wheels that stops people from doing some like goofy things, right? But so how is that for people to pick up? Because that seems quite difficult because there's quite a lot of people in Flutter community who've never actually built HTML, CSS before. So it's going to be quite a big change for them because they kind of have to at least know some basics. It's really a flavor change, right? What's been your kind of feedback on that?
That's definitely one of the toughest areas for Jasper because, as you said, like it's obviously a lot of Flutter developers that come to Jasper, and then kind of you have to deal with CSS because just for Jasper, while the component structure gives you a very familiar way, but it's still like building actual websites with HTML and CSS. So you kind of have to also understand the concepts behind HTML and CSS. This is nothing that Jaspr kind of abstracts away for you. And maybe this will be a bit better in the future. I'm still not sure on what direction I want to go here, because it's really tough to, on the one hand, don't compromise on the web platform and like how it also works with CSS, but on the other hand, kind of be targeting to Flutter devs that have never probably done CSS. It's a very tough position to be in. I'm still not super sure on where it will go. I have a few concepts and a few ideas, and I'm still trying to figure out which one is the best. But yeah, generally, if you want to build a website with Jaspr, you still prepare yourself to kind of learn at least the basics of general web development and what it means, because you can't fully avoid that.
I would say that's a little bit the same issue we have with Serverpod. If you're a Flutter front-end developer, maybe you have no concept of how a database works and all these things. So I'm actually giving a talk at FlutterCon in New York in 2 weeks. The topic will be how you move from the front end to the back end. Oh, yeah. to sort of help with that process. Maybe you should have a talk.
I do something like that, but
to web. It's a little bit more old school in a sense. HTML been around for quite a bit longer than Flutter.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good question, because now it seems like you're taking people out of the Flutter mindset and taking them back to the web mindset and kind of putting this, lipstick on a pig. And I'm talking about pig not in terms of Flutter, but pig in terms of the web, because it's just kind of it's a mess. Kilian, I think you definitely know web development. I don't know, Viktor, how much web development you've done, but it's really a mess with all these tags and everything.
So, fun fact, Flutter was originally intended to replace HTML. Who knows, maybe one can still have hope for that to happen.
It would be nice to have, but at the same time, the web is there's still some benefits for it. It's got some good stuff in it, and they're constantly adding to it. It's just, I'd wish the browser compatibility would be better. It's still better than it used to be. I think you guys are definitely older, at least definitely Viktor. You definitely probably ran into quite a few compatibility issues back in IE days, if you remember those days.
Yeah, I did. That was no fun time.
But you can also change it if you like to have it.
In a sense, but it was in the Internet Explorer days. You had to do a whole bunch of fixes just to have it work on that too. I think they intentionally made it not work, so you had to be sort of Internet Explorer first. But it was then that was the biggest browser, so you just had to do it, and then the sites just worked on Internet Explorer, so everyone had to have it. Until I guess Google fixed it with Chrome, and no one looked back.
Yeah, I had to deal with IE6 even after it was dead, because I've been in China for a while. IE6 just never died. I heard people are still using it. I'm sure there's people still using it outside of China, but still, it's amazing that this thing can never die.
Yeah, some stuff sticks along for a long time.
But still, even nowadays, we have quite a bit of compatibility stuff.
There's definitely a lot of legacy stuff there. And Jaspr can help with a few of that and tries to offer a fresh perspective. And most of the things are not dealing with JavaScript and the JavaScript ecosystem, maybe. But then, of course, there are other things that Jaspr can't really avoid to dealing with, which, for example, is CSS, I think.
To me, I think some of the new features, there's web transitions that just I was taking a look at recently. That's really exciting stuff. Yeah. I think you can probably support that automatically. Do you actually support that already in Jaspr? Because it's just some JavaScript API stuff.
I don't think it would be difficult, but I haven't tried.
But the CSS stuff works in Chrome only, as far as I know at the moment of me talking about this. So I added it to my page, and luckily that most people use Chrome, so they can see it. But for the people who are using a Mac with Safari, or for those still using IE6 or who knows whatever else they're using, still you cannot. So I'm wondering if maybe Jasper can kind of help some people and talk about, integrating with like something like Can I Use or something that can say, hey, this stuff that you're using, you can use it. But maybe it's too much work, but that would be interesting to do because yeah, I am kind of concerned about people getting into web development because they're going to be, banging their head on the desk, especially with the compatibility stuff as I talked about and everything else.
Right.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is really lies into education and making good documentation and guides and maybe talks about these topics. I also thought about like doing X for Flutter developers, like doing CSS for Flutter developers, doing HTML for Flutter developers, kind of a blog series to tackle that exact problem. I don't think necessarily the solution is in kind of abstracting everything away. I think a big part of the solution is educating people and maybe doing a mix of both. But yeah, that's definitely a hard thing to do also, yeah.
There's a reason we called web server in Serverpod Relic, because it's like a thing from the past.
wow.
We figured.
What came to my mind is it is a different mindset to be building a back end and to be building HTML pages than Flutter has, right? And I like this
Yeah.
idea that you have this tutorial stuff. I mean, I don't know how successful it can be. I hope it can be because it is tough. I mean, is there plans to kind of have these really deep, kind of full stack stuff saying like, okay, prerequisite, build a couple of apps with Flutter, now, okay, start to understand HTML. You can put divs here. You can't wrap an image tag around a p tag or something, like this kind of stuff. If there's
Yeah.
kind of ideas to start to help people so that way they have a good experience when their app does get deployed and gets used. Is that actually something that's in the works now or something that's you're just thinking about?
I haven't started it yet, but it's definitely one thing I want to do in the next couple of months. Yeah.
Well, I mean, besides the front end, what about the back end stuff? I mean, I know you have some material about how to work with a server pod, but what about like how to actually structure a proper back end, design? Because it can get quite
Yeah.
nasty if you don't.
I mean, that's actually what I'm working on right now. Like my whole focus is just building out what we will call maybe a Serverpod university or something like that, with basically how you set up your whole server and how you structure things. And it'll be like a whole tutorial for people coming, I mean, primarily from Flutter, obviously, but I think the cool part of like Serverpod, Jaspr, Flutter is that you can build like everything you need in the same ecosystem. And that's a huge win, because otherwise, I mean, if you're just building a web page, maybe this wouldn't be your first choice. Then there are like other things. But if you're building an app in Flutter and you need web pages and you need a backend, it's really, really nice to be able to do everything in Dart and just use the same language. And you can even, share code between the server, your app. Everything just works together, and probably the web page too.
Yeah,
then.
absolutely.
And especially like the say you make like I did a news app. You need a way, and you build like sort of a business layer where you pull your news articles, and you can share that, all that logic. You can share that between your Jasper server, and you can share it with your app server. And if you need other sort of things that you maybe validate data, you can share that between the server and Flutter. So just makes everything so much easier to use the same language.
Coming back to the main topic, right? The integration between Jasper and Serverpod. At the moment, we just have a way just to put them together, right? In the final product, it's a lot, right? And it sounds like the work to do that together, there was some work, but not a lot at that point. But coming forward, right, to the future, is there more talks about, how these two technologies can work together? Is there going to be, is there any like roadmap or anything like that that's planned? Or this is kind of like, okay, this is where we are and that's the end?
I think, I mean, from a functional standpoint, this is really all that is needed. You can use them together. It would be nice to have templates so you can get started a little bit quicker, maybe. But otherwise, it's all that's needed. Maybe we'll tie it together even more in the future. It's possible. On the other hand, it could be nice to no one wants to feel like they're locked into a corner, I guess. So we're actually working on right now, one of our developers is sort of rebuilding Shelf, because there are a couple of issues with Shelf that are not like super great, both what's happening internally in it that we found and also the interface. So I'm sort of improving on that. So that will be replacing Serverpod's web server, but it will still work with all. We'll make sure it works with Jaspr. And then you can plug in any sort of middleware, or you can use Jaspr for part of your web server. Maybe you also want to serve some webhooks to connect with some service, and all that stuff will just work together. So I think that will be like a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it's nice when people can pick and choose the parts they like to piece together.
It shouldn't be more than it's needed to integrate it, and try to be as lightweight as possible. And yeah, as you said, we don't want to lock anyone in. If anyone wants to use both together, that's we have that now, and then it's super easy to do. But of course, you can use other front ends with Serverpod, and you can also use other backends with Jaspr. It's really just about making it as convenient as possible to use them, but not tying them so deep together that you wouldn't be able to not use them together. So
yeah.
Well, that's also another question that came to my mind, right? This is kind of the first front end connection for Serverpod. I'm not too sure how many other deep integrations you have with Jaspr, but I just did a quick check. I didn't see anything else that you have for underneath your name, Killian, on pub.dev. Are each of you now looking into supporting others, just as an alternative? Not saying this Jaspr doesn't do enough or Serverpod doesn't do enough. Are you guys looking at other alternatives to say, if you don't like Jaspr, use this. If you don't like Serverpod, use this, and we're gonna support that, so that way you can give people the freedom to mix and match which one they like to work with?
I would say there are not really any alternative to Jaspr right now. So, but if someone wants to build another integration or we can help them out, we're happy to do that. For instance, we are looking into building a chat integration. There is a package called Flutter Chat UI that is pretty cool. So we're talking with the authors of that to make sort of a Serverpod backend for it. So it's just plug and playable. That will be a very different type of sort of non-competing integration we're building with Serverpod. But any things where we can help other packages out, we're more than happy to.
All right, sounds good so far. I mean, I think we covered quite a lot of ground. Is there anything that we missed that you guys wanted to cover? Because I feel like we covered nearly everything.
I don't think we necessarily missed it, but since we're here, I make a little plug for, we talked about Serverpod Cloud. So we will, if you check our accounts, we'll launch a way to sign up for beta testing very, very soon. And we're releasing a new version of Serverpod early next week, which will be Serverpod 2.1. And we added some really cool features to that. Biggest one is we rebuilt our streaming interface. So basically, on your server, you can just write a method that returns a stream. And then you can just yield the values over to your client. And on the client side, you just get that stream and listen to it. So that is actually super cool. It makes it very easy to reconnect to your server, because if the stream ends, you can just say wait 5 seconds and reconnect. And we handle all the underlaying stuff. Mm-hmm. That's been a lot of work. And it works with even throwing exceptions in the stream on the server. We can serialize them and unpack them on the client. So that's a super cool feature. We haven't seen any other framework that has that.
I'm actually taking inspiration from that for a feature I'm working on.
Yeah. Very cool. Then we also adding a DevTools extension that will work right inside your editor. So in VS Code, to view your logs and stuff like that. I guess that's a feature that probably should have been there from the beginning, but now we finally have it. And that is default values on our models and in the database. So that's a step forward too. So yeah, that will be out next week. Very excited about that.
From my side, I don't really have anything to announce right now. Of course, I'm working on a lot of stuff, but this is just coming out whenever I'm done with it. One cool thing, like the last Flutter release now supports multi-view embedding, where you can embed multiple separate Flutter views on your website, whether it's built with Jaspr or not. But then I'm working on like a better support for that in Jaspr, so it's super convenient to do. That's one thing that's probably coming out over the next months.
That's some exciting stuff coming out. I mean, there's already quite a lot within Jaspr itself. I was quite surprised how things have evolved, so I'm pretty happy about that. Yeah, if there's nothing else, I think, we've definitely covered everything. It's great to have both of you back on. Hopefully I have you guys on again in the future. Maybe someday I can also be in the Serverpod office. I never got an invitation. Oh, now I'm welcome. I never got that welcome before.
Just have to fly here.
That's the problem.
But well, now you have the invitation, so please come visit us. We'll get you T-shirts and stuff.
Ooh, a T-shirt. This sounds like a real tour, if you're going to get a T-shirt out of it. Kilian, did you get a T-shirt?
I got one, yeah, and a mug.
Oh.
So I got the full tour.
Oh, he gets a T-shirt and a mug. I just get a T-shirt. Okay. I have to contribute also to the project, and then I guess I get a mug. That's all the hard work you put in there, Kilian. That's what you got out of this is a mug and a T-shirt.
I'm sure we can send the T-shirt your way.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. And no rush. I need an excuse to fly over there anyways, so maybe I'll have to make my way over there. Yeah, again, it's good to see you guys. I'm happy that you guys are getting everything along, and there's two great projects coming together to make something even greater, in my opinion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's really a win for both of us.
Yeah, definitely. All right, see you guys again next time then.
Yeah, have a good one. Thank you.